The Infinity S7-9G6-88 gaming laptop uses the popular Tongfang chassis like many others, such as the Eluktronics Mech-17. So let's find out how this new 17-inch model goes with the latest specs in this detailed review. The Infinity laptop brand started up last year, and they're currently selling in Australia and New Zealand, though the information should still apply to the same models sold around the world by other companies. Starting with the specs, my unit has an Intel i7-9750H CPU, Nvidia GTX 1660 Ti graphics, a 17.3-inch 1080p 144Hz screen, 512GB M.2 NVMe SSD, and 16GB of memory running in single channel. There's a gigabit Ethernet port, 802.11ac Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth 5. There are quite a few options available though. You can find examples and updated pricing linked in the description. Before we get any further, I want to note that the single channel memory is going to result in reduced performance. The websites selling this model don't list whether they use single or dual channel memory, so I can only assume this means they're using single channel like the unit I've got here. You can check the card in the top right where I've compared single and dual channel memory. It can make a big difference to performance depending on the game. The lid of the laptop is brushed metal, while the interior is all matte black with a rubberized material. All edges and corners were smooth, and overall it felt quite well built. The weight of the laptop is listed at 2.25 kilos, though despite not having a 2.5-inch drive installed, mine was still closer to 2.5 kilos. With the 180-watt power brick and cables for charging, the total weight rises to over 3 kilos. The dimensions of the laptop are 39.5 centimeters in width, 26 centimeters in depth, and under 2.7 centimeters in height, so on the thicker side, which should aid cooling. This is still quite small for a 17-inch machine, giving us thin screen bezels. The 17.3-inch 144Hz 1080p IPS level screen looks quite good. All viewing angles were fine, though there was no G-Sync available here. You might notice that it appears to be flickering on camera. I didn't notice this in person, and after looking up the panel model, it seems to use PWM to adjust the brightness, which results in flickering that may cause eye strain for some people. However, the frequency is apparently high enough with this panel that it shouldn't bother most people. I had no problems with it in any case. I've measured the current color gamut of the screen using the Spider 5 Pro, and my results returned 98% of sRGB, 69% of NTSC, and 74% of Adobe RGB. At 100% brightness, I measured the panel at 338 nits in the center, and with an 860:1 contrast ratio, so overall above average results for a gaming laptop. There was a bit of backlight bleed. I could occasionally notice the patch down the bottom left while viewing darker content, but this will vary between laptops and panels. There was only a little screen flex. The metal lid seemed quite sturdy, and most of the length of the panel was the hinge, which helped further. I couldn't quite open it up with one finger. It was noticeably heavier towards the back. However, no problems using it on my lap. Despite the thin screen bezels, the 720p camera is found above the display in the center. Both the camera and microphone are nothing special. They work fine, but not excellent. The mechanical keyboard in my unit has per-key RGB backlighting with a few different effects available. In case you missed that, that's a mechanical keyboard, a seemingly rare option for a laptop. Overall, I thought it was great to type with. Here's how it sounds to give you an idea of what to expect. There was minimal keyboard flex while pushing down hard. It was pretty solid. Next to the power button is a button that easily lets you boost fan speed and performance. But you can do this through the software too. The touchpad has precision drivers and worked alright. It's quite large and presses down when you click, though it was pretty much impossible to press down towards the top. Fingerprints and dirt are easy to see on the black interior, and as it's some sort of rubberized material, they were a little harder than normal to clean off. On the left, there's a Kensington lock, air exhaust vent, gigabit Ethernet port, USB 2.0 Type A port, bit odd for a 2019 machine, and 3.5mm microphone and headphone jacks. On the right, there's a full-size SD card slot, 2 USB 3.1 Type A ports, and air exhaust vent, so not much to get in the way of your mouse hand if you're right-handed. On the back, there was more air exhaust vents towards the corners, then from left to right there are 2 mini DisplayPort 1.4 outputs, HDMI 2.0 output, USB 3.1 Type-C port, and the power input. No mention of Thunderbolt support here though. The front is just smooth plastic with a light bar, which can be controlled through the included Gaming Center software. On the brushed metal lid, there's just the Infinity logo in the center. Underneath, it looks like there are quite a few air vents, thick rubber feet, and the speakers towards the front left and right corners. The speakers sounded alright, about average, not really any bass though, and they didn't get too loud at maximum volume with music playing, and the latency mod results weren't looking too good. The bottom panel can be removed by taking out 9 screws with the Phillips head screwdriver. There's actually a metal heatsink on the bottom of the panel for keeping the M.2 drives cool, something I don't often see. Once inside from left to right, we've got access to the two M.2 slots, single 2.5-inch drive bay, 2 memory slots, battery, and Wi-Fi card. Powering the laptop is a smaller 3-cell 41Wh battery, and with a full charge and just watching YouTube videos with the screen on half brightness, keyboard lighting off, and background apps disabled, I was able to use it for 3 hours and 57 minutes. The Intel integrated graphics were in use during this test thanks to Nvidia Optimus. While playing The Witcher 3 with medium settings and Nvidia's battery boost set to 30 FPS, the battery lasted for 1 hour and 11 minutes. However, the battery didn't seem capable of providing enough power, as the game was running at 17 FPS the entire time rather than the usual constant 30. At 13% remaining, or after the first hour and 4 minutes, this lowered further to 4 FPS and was no longer usable. So overall, the battery wasn't great. You'll definitely want to stay plugged in where possible. It's worth noting that I didn't notice any battery drain during any of my testing with the included 180 watt power brick in use. Thermal testing was completed with an ambient room temperature of 21 degrees Celsius, so expect different temperatures in different environments. Also keep in mind there are heat pipes shared between processor and graphics, so a change in one of these will affect the other. All testing was completed with the game mode enabled for best performance, though better performance generally equals more heat. Out of the box, the CPU also came with a -0.05 volt undervolt, so that's the stock setting. Where I've noted UV on the graph, that's my further -0.15 volt undervolt to improve this more. At the bottom of the graph, at idle, the temperatures were quite cool. The rest of the results are combined CPU and GPU workloads. The gaming tests in the upper half were done with Watch Dogs 2, as I find it to use a good combination of CPU and GPU. The stress tests represent a worst case scenario, and were done by running the 8-64 CPU stress test and Heaven GPU benchmark at the same time in order to attempt to fully load the system. Starting with the stress tests, regardless of the fan speed being left at automatic or maxed out, the CPU was hitting a combination of power limit throttling with a 60-watt CPU TDP and thermal throttling at 95 degrees Celsius. Honestly, I think this is completely reasonable given the CPU is able to run at 60 watts in this combined stress test. That's rarely the case. Anyway, if we apply the -0.15 volt undervolt to the CPU, the temperature drops back 6 degrees. And a couple on the graphics, presumably due to those shared heat pipes. By applying the Thermaltake Massive 20 cooling pad, the CPU temperature drops by a further 8 degrees, and 7 less on the GPU, a great result. The gaming results weren't causing the laptop to get that hot even out of the box. But as you can see here, it was possible to get some nice improvements to temperatures with undervolting in the cooling pad, though the cooler results would to some degree be due to the single channel RAM configuration. These are the average clock speeds for the same tests just shown. In almost all cases, the full 4.0 GHz all-core turbo boost speed of the i7-9750H is being reached. The only times this wasn't happening was with the combined CPU and GPU stress tests running prior to undervolting further. And remember, I say further as it was already undervolted by -0.05 volts out of the box. We can see that our high clock speeds are due to the high CPU TDP. Even under combined CPU and GPU load, this was able to get to the 60-watt PL1 limit, which is pretty impressive. These are the clock speeds I got while just running CPU-only stress tests without any GPU load. Even out of the box, we're hitting the 4.0 GHz all-core turbo boost speed no problem, so no change here with the extra undervolt. With the temperatures though, we can see that the additional undervolt is lowering the temperature by 10 degrees. So while not needed to improve performance under this workload, it does help it run cooler. And this is because the undervolt lowers the amount of power needed. To demonstrate how this translates into performance, I've got some Cinebench CPU benchmarks here. At stock, we're seeing about what we'd expect from the 8750H. But then with my additional undervolting applied, we're getting closer to 1300, undoubtedly due to the higher 60-watt power limit we've got here. I've also got the results from the newest Cinebench R20, and again there was a nice boost with the additional undervolting applied. As for the external temperatures where you'll actually be putting your hands, at idle it was in the low 30s in the center, fairly average. While gaming, the wrist rest area was still cool, and the sides, including the WASD keys, actually felt cool to the touch. The middle was only a little warm in the low 40s, and then very similar results with the stress tests running. As for the fan noise produced by the laptop, I'll let you have a listen to some of these tests. At idle it was quiet, but there was still audible fan noise. While gaming, it was just a little quieter than most other gaming laptops tested in this same test, and then a little louder and closer to average with the stress tests running, and only a little louder with the fans at maximum. Overall, I was quite impressed with the results from the thermal testing. At stock, yes, it does run a bit hot, though the higher clock speeds are there thanks to the higher CPU TDP, which could actually hit 60 watts even under combined CPU and GPU load. Boost the fans and increase the undervolt, and we can further lower the temperatures by a good amount. However, I'd expect higher temperatures when used with a dual-channel memory configuration, as that will unlock the full potential of the CPU and GPU. Next, let's take a look at some gaming benchmarks. I've tested these games with these Nvidia drivers and Windows fully updated with gaming mode enabled. Again, keep in mind the laptop was tested with the stock out-of-the-box configuration, so single-channel memory will be reducing performance. Expect better results with dual-channel. Battlefield 5 was tested in campaign mode rather than multiplayer, as it's easier to consistently reproduce the test run. The game was running alright. Decent FPS even with ultra settings, though the 1% lows are on the lower side due to the single-channel memory, a trend we'll see throughout all games tested. Apex Legends was tested with either all settings at maximum or all settings at the lowest possible values, as it doesn't have predefined setting presets. Max settings were reaching around 80 FPS, with a 15% improvement possible with minimum settings. Far Cry New Dawn was tested with the built-in benchmark, and the results were okay. Still above 60 FPS at ultra settings, though as a CPU-intensive test, not as great as we'd get from dual-channel memory. Shadow of the Tomb Raider was tested with the built-in benchmark, and again, okay results, lower than most other machines I've recently tested, but still above 60 FPS at highest settings in this test. CSGO was tested with the Euletical FPS benchmark, and we're still getting pretty high frame rates for this test, with over 100 at max settings, though as a CPU-sensitive game, I'd expect dual-channel to improve this by a nice amount. Dota 2 was tested in the middle lane with an average amount of action going on, and the results were okay. Again, lower 1% lows, which I suspect is due to the single-channel memory, but I was still able to get through a whole game at Ultra without any problems. Rainbow Six Siege was tested with the built-in benchmark, and tends to favour Nvidia's new Turing architecture compared to other games, and still over 100 FPS was possible with Ultra settings here. Fortnite was tested using the replay feature, and generally it runs quite well on modern hardware, with even 100 FPS at epic settings still possible in this test. Overwatch is another game that is well optimized and runs on pretty much anything. Even with the single-channel configuration, the average frame rates are quite high. However, 1% low performance is lower than expected and a bit inconsistent. However, it still played great. The Witcher 3 was tested with HairWorks disabled, and it played fine at ultra settings. Still above 60 FPS with the 1% low not too far behind. No problems here. To get some context, let's see how it compares with some other gaming laptops. Use this information as a rough guide only, as tests were done at different times with different drivers. Here are the results from Far Cry 5 using the built-in benchmark at ultra settings, with the Infinity laptop shown up the top in red. The results were the lowest out of all laptops I've recently tested. But this is definitely due to the single-channel memory configuration. I don't think the 1660 Ti is that low. All of the other laptops were tested with dual-channel. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider with the built-in benchmark at highest settings, the Infinity laptop is tied for last place with the thermal throttling Alienware M15. Granted, that's more expensive and it does have dual-channel memory. In any case, about 60 FPS at max settings is alright for this test. In Battlefield 5 with ultra settings, we're seeing decent averages, around the same level as other laptops like the Dell G5. Granted, that one does thermal throttle on the CPU. The 1% low on the Infinity laptop is the lowest out of all results, but again, that's just due to the single-channel memory. Overall, the gaming performance was okay. Modern games still played without issue with decent settings. Just don't take these results as best-case numbers for the 1660 Ti. As again, it's running single-channel memory which will negatively affect performance, but you could of course upgrade this. Now for the benchmarking tools. I've tested Heaven, Valley, and Superposition from Unigine, as well as Firestrike, TimeSpy, Port Royal, and VRMark from 3DMark. Just pause the video if you want a detailed look at these results. As we saw earlier, we've got the option of overclocking the graphics and undervolting the CPU to increase performance, so let's see how this actually helps in gaming. Far Cry 5 was retested using the built-in benchmark at 1080p, and with the GPU overclock and additional CPU undervolt, there was quite a big performance boost at higher setting levels. At ultra settings, the tweaks were giving a 16% performance boost to average FPS, with a larger 18% improvement to 1% lows, though I'd expect a smaller difference with dual-channel memory. As mentioned before, it's also got turbo mode, and this lets you specify how much power from the CPU you want to send to the GPU instead, which could help performance where we're GPU bound. I didn't find this to help as much as I expected here, which I'm thinking may again be due to the single channel memory limitations. In any case, I tested Firestrike with gaming mode and turbo mode on the maximum 40% and saw a 5% boost to the graphics. So there was some improvement possible. I'll also note that neither of these modes outright overclocked the core or memory clock speeds of the GPU. They seem to affect power limitations. I've used Crystal DiskMark to test the storage, and my 512GB M.2 NVMe SSD was performing well for the reads, but lower on the writes. And keep in mind, you can add a second M.2 drive or a 2.5-inch drive. I've tested the SD slot with a V90 rated card, and the results were decent. For updated pricing, check the links in the description, as prices will change over time. At the time of recording, in Australia, this model is going for $2,400 Australian dollars. For my international viewers, without our tax and converting the price, that's under $1,500 US dollars. Compared to many other laptops from larger brands here in Australia, that's not too bad. However, at the same time, you can get these same specs in a 17-inch Clevo unit for significantly less. Granted, it is currently on sale, though you do have the option of paying more for dual-channel memory. To be fair though, the Infinity 15-inch version with same specs is $400 Australian dollars less than the 17-inch one I've got here. So what do you guys think about the Infinity S7-9G6-88, apart from the long name? Let's conclude with the good and the bad. Overall, the laptop itself is quite good. As I'd expect, it's a popular Tongfang chassis and well built. The materials feel good and the quality is above average. It's got a mechanical keyboard, an uncommon feature for a laptop, and it was great to type with. The screen was decent in terms of color gamut and brightness while still being 144Hz. However, the flickering may be an issue for some, and there was some backlight bleed detected. While under combined CPU and GPU load, I was seeing excellent performance in terms of clock speeds. It's great that they've got a little undervolt on the CPU out of the box. It did run on the hotter side by default when under heavy load, but with some small tweaks it was possible to significantly reduce temperatures. Even under full load, the keyboard area was noticeably cooler. The WASD keys still felt cold even while gaming. This would likely change when going to a dual-channel configuration though. I can't say by how much without testing. Unfortunately, I don't have spare memory at the moment. That brings us to the biggest downside. Despite having a decent CPU and GPU combination, it's hampered by single-channel memory. While you can of course upgrade to dual-channel later yourself, personally, I'm of the opinion that a laptop advertised as a gaming laptop should come with dual-channel out of the box for optimal performance if it's not specifying what it's got. I don't think most people buying would be aware of it and they could be missing out on higher performance. While the Dell G5, for example, is available with single and dual-channel configurations, at least they tell you which you're getting on the website. The battery was on the smaller side and seemed a little weak, as the games I was testing weren't able to hit the standard 30 FPS cap of Nvidia battery boost. So I'd want to stick to being plugged in while gaming if possible for better performance. I'm not sure if an upgrade is possible. The 15-inch Tongfang chassis does have a larger battery available. That may be possible here too. Assuming dual-channel memory doesn't raise the temperatures too much, I think this would be an excellent performing gaming laptop. Though I can't ignore that you can get the same specs for less money in a Clevo unit. Granted, this one does have some nice extras like the mechanical keyboard. Let me know what you guys thought about the Infinity S7 gaming laptop down in the comments. And if you're new to the channel, get subscribed for future tech videos like this one.